Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. You're looking out the window of an office on the first floor of Discovery Hall here on the campus of Central Washington University. And I'm your host, Nick Zentner. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The local time is 2:46 p.m. Pacific time. And today's date is Thursday, November 20th, 2025. That's a familiar opening, isn't it? We've been doing that for 5 years. We've had that opening with that routine, that ritual, since the spring of 2020 or thereabouts. I forget when I exactly started that sort of thing, but it's comforting to have some rhythm. So if you're watching this in replay, and that's most of you, you can skip ahead probably 13 minutes to the top of the program. There'll be a little chapter title, but for the rest of you, we have already more than 300 live viewers. Such a thrill. It never gets old. You host a party, you wonder if anybody's going to come, and when you look and see that there's that many people that are here ahead of time, it's especially meaningful. Thank you. Patricia is in Adelaide, Australia. Disco Sound System says hi from LaConner, Washington. Love LaConner. Minneapolis, Minnesota, Escanaba, Michigan, Meridian, Idaho, Marinette, Wisconsin tonight. Torrance, California, Stevensville, Montana. Let me go down to live. Colorado Springs, Colorado, Webb Lake, Wisconsin, Elko, Nevada. Scrolling fast now. Half Moon Bay, California, Port Wing, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Oregon, as opposed to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm still alive. Lava Hot Springs, Idaho. Orlando, Florida. Tucson, Arizona. That's Elaine. I suppose somebody else from Tucson will be joining us soon. Fairbanks, Alaska, where it's plus 29 degrees Fahrenheit, reports Don. Thank you, Don. Hubbard, Oregon. Toledo, Ohio. Newark, Delaware. Forest Grove, Oregon. Garrett, the Dutch Night Owl from the Netherlands. Hello, Garrett. Deep in the Chuckanut, that's Ian. Marin County, California. Southwest Virginia. Omaha, Nevada. Shot of adrenaline here. Omaha, Nebraska. That wasn't that hard. Come on. Vancouver, Washington. London, England. Whitehorse, Yukon. Kitty from the Netherlands. San Diego, Glasgow, Scotland, Olympia, Washington. Many of you are regular viewers, and I don't know. Do you expect some sort of certificate at the end of this that you attended each 26 of the shows live? I don't think such a certificate exists. Oh boy, my mouth. Come on now. It's been a full day, but I should be warmed up by now. Come on. Let's go. Open the mouth. Thank you all for being here. Now we're approaching 400 live viewers. Let me wet my whistle and do a few thank yous. It's been a while. Let's do a few thank yous. This arrived in the mail from North Manchester, Indiana. Marcia, thank you. From Warsaw, Indiana. Nice things. Photo of Marcia visiting our office at some point. Hannah Shamlou, Chris Mattinson, Marcia, and myself. And Marcia created this tote bag. North to Alaska on one side, my name on the other side. Thank you so much, Marcia. I feel the love. Thank you. For those who have been curious about the mugs, Docky, Kirk in Philomath, Oregon, has a business card now. Cartoons in Clay. Kirk, if you're with us live, I don't know if you're okay with me sharing this or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. And we're talking about these custom-made mugs that Kirk just delivers to me on occasion to make sure that I get the mugs to some of the geologists who've been very generous with their time. Nat the Wonder Boy and others. Hannah Shamlu took a couple recently. And if you want to contact Kirk, just to say thank you maybe for his creativity and his generosity, these are the mugs by Kirk. And Kirk, I'm sorry if you're going to get slammed with emails and you didn't want it, but you gave me the business card. Maybe that meant that you were okay with people knowing how to contact you, possibly even ordering their own thing. But wait, there's more. So we have started the Alaska A to Z series, and this was just set outside of my office door from a mystery person. It's bucket season. We got some buckets. Thank you, mystery person. And there are some trinkets that can be put into the buckets. If I don't find a way to use them here, I will find a way to use them with our grandson. Thank you. And Mark from Dahlonega, Georgia. Nice things, nice things. Great to meet you in September. So I guess Mark came out here from Georgia. So I don't remember. I kind of remember that. So this was sent from Georgia, and some trinkets and an Alaskan A to Z bucket. Thank you. It's a community. What can I say, man? It's a give and take. It's retro. It's old fashioned. And feels good. Thank you. Let me say hi to a few more of you. I'll give you a shout out the window yet again. It is approaching 3 p.m. Pacific. It's 49 degrees Fahrenheit. There's Shelf Cam. Liz and I took a long walk out in the eastern part of our valley, and she said something memorable. I say that with surprise. She always has interesting things to say, but she said, November is a nice month. The light is just so good. And she's not a photographer, but I've been thinking about that all week. And I brought it up a couple times at home. Like, that was a good comment. I never really appreciated November that much. But when we don't have gray rain and we do have some sun like we did today, that low angle sun and mild temperatures, almost 50 degrees Fahrenheit here at our latitude, it's a nice combo. So good job by you, Elizabeth Zentner. St. Louis, Missouri. Edmonton, Alberta. Hello, Dale. Albany, Georgia. Philadelphia. Go Birds. Glendora, California. Let's do a few more, and then I need to take my walk. I'm going to be relaxed today. It's been a full day. So I'm kind of worn out, so that's the negative. The positive is I'm not all uptight, and hopefully I can just get in a flow pretty early, and we can just ride that together. Kalamazoo, Gary, hello. Sunny here in Norway today, but sadly freezing, 11 degrees Fahrenheit. Thank you. Falls Church, Virginia. Gio Fubar says, hello to all my fellow Canadians. Canadian flag. Sacramento, California. Surrey, British Columbia. Everett, Washington. Boy. Gabsy says, hello from France. That's French. Swansea, Wales. Pleasant View, Tennessee. Boyd's, Washington. Hi, Danes, Norwegians, and Swedes. Okay, Nina. Uppercase. Bob Hildebrand is in the house. Hello, Bob. Robert Hildebrand. Robert. Bastrop, Texas, y'all. Valrubar, Denmark. Hello. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Belfast, Maine, catches my eye there. And approaching 500 live viewers. Let's go. Shout out the window, take a walk very quickly, and we will go. Thank you. Program will start in 3 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode E of Alaska A to Z. I'm your host, Ned Zentner, and thank you for coming back for yet another episode in this series. It's Alaska A to Z, so your first question is, are we in Alaska yet? And my answer is no, not yet. And you're like, why not? It's like, well, we've already established what we're trying to do here in the month of November at the beginning of this A to Z series. The plan, can I remind you, is to establish some framework, some big ideas, maybe some original ideas, some new ideas, some alternative ideas, and look at some geology down here, and then work our way towards Alaska and see if we can use some of these themes that we're learning this month and bring them north to Alaska. That's the plan. But you have my word that by the time we finish on Saturday, I plan these 2 at a time. Thursday afternoon and Saturday morning, there's not much time in between. So I have both today and Saturday fleshed out in a very loose way. And you have my word that we're going to go up to Alaska a little bit before we take our break for Thanksgiving. So I don't normally go right to the schedule, but since we're about to do a little break, let me show you what I have in mind. By the drill by now. Thursday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific, Saturdays at 8 a.m. Pacific. And here we are with episode E, Thursday, November 20th of 2025. And we'll see you again, hopefully live, but not everybody can handle that, Saturday morning, November 22nd. But we are taking the week of Thanksgiving here in the States off, and then we'll be back at it in early December. So I have chosen, since I saw you last, to push the magma shows, Slab Failure versus Arc Magma. I want to push those to early December. So we'll still be talking a little bit of Bob Hildebrand by the time we get into early December. That means I wanted to make room for a couple of things here, and it's going to be faults. Faults today and faults on Saturday. Thrust faults and strike slip faults, but not in a random sense, not in some sort of vacuum. There's a framework, there's a context, and we've already established it. This is a series. This is the 5th show. And so you're watching these in order, and you know what we are trying to build. At least I think most of you do. And I want to say one other thing before we get into the geology. I really enjoy doing these alphabets. This is our 6th in a row, I think. 5th, 6th, kind of forget. Many winters in a row we've been doing this. And I have deep joy out of doing this. I don't really have to do this, you know. There's no signed contract where I have to do this. It's like, I just really enjoy it. It's a format where I think I'm at my best, if you're willing to let me say that out loud. But I need to find a framework or a motivation or a theme or an approach that excites me. Otherwise, I think it can turn into a chore. There's 26 episodes. There's a lot of energy put into these alphabets, and I love it. Don't ask me. Don't get me wrong. But it takes me weeks and weeks, sometimes months and months during the summer, talking to friends who are geologists, bouncing ideas off until I can finally find something that gets me excited. If I can't find that approach or that trick or that something that's uniquely mine, I don't think I would want to do the alphabet. So in this case, this winter, Hildebrand is the thing that finally got me going. I've been meaning to read his stuff for years, and this gave me an excuse to sit down and learn some of Hildebrand's stuff, try to develop a relationship with him and engage with him, and that's been happening this month. He's here in the live chat again today. And so we're going to bring Bob's ideas up to Alaska. Will it pay off specifically for us? I think so, but I'm not positive. But that's why we're not going to Alaska right away. I'm just reminding you of that. And graphically, you'll see the Hildebrand stuff we established down here. I think you'll be able to graphically see the connection to Alaska today and into Saturday. That's the end of the introduction, everybody. More than 600 live viewers. Let's go. The keynote is a way for me to help remember what I want to do more than anything else. And just in case you're curious, I'm always working in this format. So I put these big letters in here just so I don't have to enlarge the slide each time to remember what I'm doing. So I know it's kind of awkward to see this big text, but it's just, as I'm putting these programs together, it's a roadmap for myself. Okay, so that reminds me of the first thing I want to do. Okay, so I was improving the last 2 letters, if you recall. And I'm still kind of improving because I got to a point, do you remember that story from more than a week ago? I got stuck. I got to Bob's custom slideshow, and there were a couple of segments that just kind of paralyzed me. Because Bob was talking about a thrust belt with 4 different generations of thrust faults in one belt. And I didn't know what to do with that. I do now, after our improv for the last week or so. So let's go to Docky and graphically show you what I mean. So I'm going to make up a place here. Is this slide on? Yes. Janesville to Billstown, made up names. This is a map. North is to the top. This is a geologic thrust belt, meaning there's a bunch of faults, a bunch of thrust faults in a particular belt, a particular zone on this geologic map. Okay, fine. Do we know what a thrust fault is? Let me do it very quickly. I've been using pizza boxes in the past when I was at home. The idea is if you have a bunch of crust and you deform it brittly because the crust is cold and you squeeze the crust, then you're going to break it and you're going to have pizza boxes or plywood sheets, or in this case, textbooks. And we're just going to shove slices of the crust up on top of another. So there's 3 books here. There's 2 thrust faults. There's a thrust fault between each of these books. Compress, shove it up. Compressed, shove it up. So there's 2 thrust faults in cross-sectional view. Well, I want to look at it on a map. And that's what we were doing with Hildebrand, and what we finally will get to that segment of his custom slideshow. So here we are. So Bob says there's a bunch of thrust faults in this made-up thrust belt. Bob didn't say that. Let me just say that it's a generic thrust belt with a bunch of thrust faults. Fine. The normal way to view a thrust belt is just to say, okay, we got a bunch of thrust belts. There's crustal deformation. It's part of some mounting building event. Great. Thin-skinned, severe style, fine. But the assumption, at least from my brain, and I think most, is that all of those thrust faults in that thrust belt are the same age. And so if we go to this made-up example, and we put some thrust faults in this thrust belt, and this is the symbol we have in geology. I'm not going to do this for every line, but you get the idea. We put these little teeth, these little colored teeth on the upper plate. So these are 2 thrust faults, and each of these are pieces of crust, pizza boxes that are being shoved up and over in map view, and then think of the textbooks I just showed you. So far, so good. We're compressing the crust. We're getting brittle deformation. The thrust faults are active, and we're shoving these textbooks one on top of another up this area and shortening the crust. But what paralyzed me a week and a half ago is the fact that, well, what if we then realize that not all of those thrust faults are the same age? And what if there's actually 4 different generations the colors are the different generations. What if you have 4 different families of thrust belts organized by color? And in this case, that's what the title of this episode means. Thrust fault families is we have 4 different generations of thrust faults, each of them separate from the other, all happening in the same general area. Why am I belaboring it? The thrust faults that are in the Rocky Mountains in Montana and southern British Columbia have 4 different generations of thrust faults. News to me, I think news to most people, and we're concealing a Baja BC fault in the thrust belt because the youngest of the 4 generations of thrust fault families is young enough to be sliding pizza boxes over the Baja BC fault. So the older thrust faults have been broken by the Baja BC fault, but the youngest of the 4 batches has not been breaking, was not broken by the Baja BC fault because the youngest batch is younger, and we're sliding these sheets of plywood over the top of the whole frickin' thing. So this is what froze me in my tracks a week and a half ago, and we're going to eventually get to Bob telling us about these different ages of thrust faults, and that is a key portion, maybe the key portion of this paper. Because remember, this brand new paper by Robert S. Hildebrand talks about a concealed Baja BC fault that nobody could find, and he's saying it's there, it's just underneath the youngest of the 4 batches of thrust faults. Okay, I've said that a number of times. That's where we are headed. Hopefully that made-up example works for you just hypothetically. So let's go to the slideshow and follow our nose. Pretend map thrust belt, just did it. Collisional suite. So last time, previously on St. Elsewhere, we were doing what? We were doing something that was pleasing to me, and I think it's still pleasing to me. Let me do it very, very quickly just to get you back in the flow. my phrase, collisional suite. Two major pieces of crust, maybe North American continent colliding with an exotic oceanic island. Before the collision, we were using 124 million years old as one example of Bob's collisions in the Cretaceous, in the Jurassic, and even in the Eocene. But let's just pick, we were using 124 last time, remember? And before the 124 collision, we have westward subduction, according to Bob, underneath this thing out in the water. We're generating slow but steady subduction, therefore slow but steady buildup of arc magmas, and the arc magmas tied to this collision are pre-collision and before the 124. I'm not going to go through it all again. We did it last time. Hopefully you feel good about it. We do the collision, we close the ocean basin, it's gone, and a number of things happen post-collision. We're reviewing from last time. Post-collision, post-collision, post-collision. What's all this stuff going on? It's after the collision, it's after the closing of the ocean basin, and apparently the first thing happening is a bunch of thrust faults. That's our topic, at least one of the main topics of today. Textbooks sliding on top of each other, pizza boxes, plywood sheets, whatever you want. The ages are post-collision, not pre-collision. These are ages in millions of years ago. Shortly after that, we have invasion from below of magmas that are not arc magma. We're not subducting anymore because the ocean plate is gone. We're having slab failure magmas. Tune in after Thanksgiving to get more detail on that. But these very different geochemical magmas are invading the thrust fault area, and at the same time, we are lifting this whole scene. Probably both sides of the suture are being lifted because of the ongoing collision. That's exhumation. And so mid-crustal metamorphic rocks are finding their way at the surface. They're getting to the surface. They're rocketing to the surface during this exhumation post-collision. The exhumation drives erosion, and so suddenly we're taking all sorts of sediment and having it be shed off to both sides. Severe, 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 everything's severe in Bob Hildeband language. And this whole collision of stuff, this whole collection of features, this is a family. A family of features tell the story of one collision long ago, this one back in the Cretaceous. This is the hinterland that is being exhumed, uplifted, and you have a mixture of plutons and complicated metamorphic rocks. A plutonic complex. In this case, the Omanika plutonic complex, which is mostly exposed in eastern British Columbia. This is the thrust belt in the foreland. These are the sediments in the foreland. That was last time. Let's break new ground. This from a Hildebrand paper of some vintage. I'm starting to lose track of which papers I'm going to. And Bob is showing he had a name for a while. I don't know if he still uses it. Rubia for this continent out in the water. Here's our arc magmatism. Here's our westward subduction. Here's our stuff accumulating in this trench. Here's some of those foreland deposits. Collision, good. Viewer time. I don't know if we'll stick with it, but we were playing with the idea of stop, drop, and pop. So if we're bringing, with westward subduction, North America closer and closer to this exotic terrain out in the water, we're eventually going to collide things, but we're going to pull not only the ocean plate down, but we're going to pull the leading edge of North America underneath. We're going to pull the leading edge of the continent underneath this thing out in the water. Now we're getting some nuance that's important. This is from Bob. It's backwards on purpose to show the westward subduction. Same idea. Now let's focus. I last time was focusing on this dropping, this pinching off and this dropping of this ocean material, ocean plate material. This is going to be an ocean slab heading for the mantle. But today I want to focus a little bit more on the continental crust that's kind of against its will, subducting into the trench, but it's too thick and buoyant to want to truly go down. And so when we finally stop, drop, and pop. So when we finally drop this slab away, we're going to pop this thing back to the surface. Viewer Tom from Maple Valley. Nice things, nice things. The sketch you made of the hinterlands was brilliant, really gives us something to look for across the Cordillera. But I wanted to see one more step, says Tom, viewer Tom. I wanted to see how the partially subducted slab under the hinterland was buoyant and lifting the hinterland as it popped back up. For me, this paints a picture for even the North Cascades, which is in the Eocene. We had always been left hanging. Why did the crystalline core of the North Cascades go down and pop back up so quickly? Hildebrand shows us why. To help me visualize it, I took your sketch after Saturday's show, combined it with one of Hildebrand's sketches, and then I, Tom, the viewer, warped it to show the uplift. See attached. So here's a screenshot from Saturday's show, episode D. Tom's taking Bob's sketch. He's manipulating it. He's manipulating my sketch somehow and showing we're dropping and we're buoyant. That's Tom adding the word buoyant to pop this thing back up, to really see the exhumation. But the exhumation, the sudden rocketing to the surface of the plutonic complex, is in direct response to this thing dropping out of sight down below. Thank you, viewer Tom. Cascade Carolyn, a viewer, says, "Hi, how about you play stop, drop, and pop? We're just playing with it. We're just playing with it." Ted Irving. Chris Mattinson is caught up on the series. Heard from Chris on Sunday. He said, here's who did it. Elena Sizova is Austrian, I believe. And that's all I have. I don't have a paper. Chris said I'll maybe try to find the reference for you, but I haven't gotten that yet. But we continue to use this animation by Elena. Elena, if words get to you that we're using your animation, thank you very much. It's been super helpful for us. And I'm showing it again today. I probably won't stop showing it. I've shown it in downtown lectures in the past. But now I want to focus on what's going on up in here. So again, my attention last weekend was at the drop right there. And interestingly, I think a lot of the popping, at least in Elena's animation, is happening before the actual drop. But maybe that's just my eye. What do you think? Are you lost? Do you know this is the exotic island and this is continental North America coming in and being pulled under the exotic land out in the water? And then our thrust faults, the topic of today, haven't started yet, and there they go. There's a thrust fault. There's a thrust fault. I'm like Oprah. You win a car and you win a car. So I'm leading towards an email that I got from Bob, who is not wild about my phrasing of hit. And he's wanting us to visualize a little bit more carefully what's going on at this collision. Maybe he doesn't even like the word collision. I don't know. So we're talking about something like this. This is an Eocene age, I think, still fuzzy, an Eocene age primarily of metamorphic core complex in the Okanagan area. This is the southern portion of the Amanika Belt, I think. Maybe I'm wrong now that I say that out loud. We're heading here. There's our thrust fault. There's our family of thrust faults. But remember what we did in the open. These are not all the same age, according to Hildebrand, who is quoting other work done by some workers in the thrust belt here. Jerome Lessman. Listen, I hear from a lot of people. I appreciate all the feedback. You've heard me say that before. Not just a few of you, quite a few of you say, cut all the commentary, cut all the backstory, and you were sitting there and you got an email and then you did something else. Just give us the geology. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the feedback. I want to do it this way. This whole thing is unique, and part of the uniqueness of this whole experience is me getting nudges and getting goosed on occasion by friends by email, by viewers by email, by comments that you leave in the live chat and down below. Goosed in a good way. Sometimes I get stuck, or sometimes I truly get overwhelmed with all the stuff that could possibly be absorbed. And so I am open not only to all geologists, but I'm open to comments that help me go in certain directions. That's why we push the magmas to next week, 2 weeks from now, after Thanksgiving. So I'm including how I build some of these episodes. I don't know if I have to justify it to you necessarily. You're not going to be satisfied, but basically, I feel like when we want to learn something new, there's some skills involved in trying to keep your eye on the prize, whatever that prize is, keep your momentum going, and not get bogged down, not get, derailed by some negative whatever. And so I like sharing what kind of nudges me in certain directions, whether it's solicited or unsolicited. In the case of Jerome, who's a friend, and Sky Cooley, who's a friend, and Gary Paul, who's a friend, I emailed those guys after Saturday's show before I kind of checked out mentally for the weekend. And I said, hey, I'm not sure where to go next. So here are some of the nudges from folks that you know from YouTube videos of the past few years. Here's Jerome Lessman, Vancouver Island University. Last episode, Nick, your cartoons of the suites, the collisional suite, sure looked like they were building up to the development of a metamorphic core complex. I'm not sure if that was your intention, but that's where you were going, whether you know it or not. Metamorphic core complexes in the crazy Eocene discussions were presented as they usually are in the literature, thickened crust exhumed because of extension. But it can be the other way around, with extension resulting from the thickened but buoyant crust. Apparently, that's been a debate for a while. Workers have interesting maps of thrusts and plutons and interesting ages for the thickening linked to subduction. And the whole Pluton question is really fascinating. Okay, that's after Thanksgiving. Thank you, Jerome Lessman. Bob, with an email at some point. Reacting to Sean Reagan's interview, if you remember that a few episodes back. The 110 to 105 million-year-old extension of the Yukon Tanana, okay, suddenly we are up in Alaska, as mentioned by Sean Reagan, makes good sense as extensional collapse during the hinterland exhumation of the 124 million-year-old severe orogeny, as those rocks were well to the south in the Great Basin region. I was surprised you didn't. Okay, then he's scolding me again. My point in showing this to you again is that I didn't know what to do with those sentences. Now I do, because of last week when we were drawing things together. And I can now do something with the age of extension, the extensional collapse, the hinterland exhumation, the 124, that's all familiar to me now. That's the process at work. Dock and slice. I might abandon some of these things at some point. I like them currently. Dock and slice. What do I mean? Oh, here. So, quick review from last couple of shows. I like the idea of accreting an exotic terrain, big or small, preferably big so that there's a collision. Arc and slab mail, we got it. Okay, the collisional suite is in here. But then at some point, maybe not immediately, but at some point after we accrete, we slice it and we send half of it to the north. That's a theme. I don't insist on it, but that's a theme that I'm just curious if we can find different generations of dock and slice that possibly match the generations of the thrust fault families. I have a coloring scheme about to come up. I don't know if I love it, but it's my first attempt at a color scheme by age. Why did I get into that? More emails. Here's... Oh, I'm not ready for that. Here's my email, November 17th, whenever that was. Starting to get serious, Bob. This is me emailing Bob Hildebrand. I think I'm maybe going to hold off on the magmas till after Thanksgiving. Maybe with episodes E and F, which is happening right now. I look carefully at different generations of thrusting and look carefully at the ages of the units that are offset by the Baja BC fault, including the Western Interior Seaway units. My questions about the thrust belts are here. Do all 4 ages of the thrusting in the thrust belt match 4 separate collisions? Did all 4 ages of thrusting generate their own thrust faults from scratch? In other words, do we have virgin thrusts cutting up through the section each time we have a collision? Or what's the opposite of that? I guess the opposite of that is we have thrust faults, fine, and then there's another collision and we just reactivate the same thrust faults and then reactivate them again. It's a question I had for Hildebrand. Did the 54 to 52 million-year-old thrusting, the batch that concealed the Baja BC fault, occur in response to Silezia's arrival? Do you have a cross-section, even a rough sketch on a napkin, of the 4 generations of thrust faults and their relationship with the Baja BC fault? Does each batch of thrusts cut up the previous batch? Thanks, Nick. All right, so here's Bob's reply. Nick, before we start, uppercase, red text, I think you are misleading people by using the term hit and showing collisions as 2 adjacent blocks. That's not at all what happens. It's always one plate being pulled beneath the other. There is no hit, but instead scraping off of material from the lower plate and adding it to the upper plate as it slides beneath, pulled down by the oceanic part of the plate. The rocks scraped off the lower plate become the fold and thrust belt. All this is important as the geometries are critical, especially for slab break-off magmas. Plates are only side by side in transform and transcurrent faults. Mountains do not generally form by a hit, but instead by erosion and exhumation of the hinterland during and possibly after collision. Tone's weird, Bob, but whatever. I'll take your point. So I took that to heart and redid the collisional suite sketch. First crack, last night. Bees were crawling all over my maps as I was trying to work. Let's go to Docky. Instead of this, what do we think of this? I'm trying to show that it's not 2 blocks in a very simple way colliding, but we are pulling the continent of North America into the trench, pulling it under, let's say, Wrangellia, if it's 100 million years ago. We're pulling the slab. We still have the arc magmas. We still have the slab failure magmas. We still have the thrust faults, but this is new to me, I have to say, and quite radical, but I guess it's conventional among many who think about such things. I still don't even really totally get this, but this is, it's not North America crust being broken by thrust faults. Is that what you're saying? Wait, I've got this. Hang on. I've got this. Yeah. So I've got Bob's email with Elena's animation. Let me just slow down and read this again. It's always one plate being pulled beneath the other. There is no hit, but instead of scraping off material from the lower plate and adding it to the upper plate as it slides beneath, scraping off material from the lower plate and adding it to the upper plate as it slides beneath, pulled down by the oceanic part of the plate. The rocks scraped off of the lower plate become the fold and thrust belt. The rocks scraped off of the lower plate. This is like a snow shovel, and we're scraping off the stuff that's trying to go down. This is like an accretionary wedge? I think I'm seeing it for the first time right now. Okay, so I'm taking your point. We're being careful, but I'm going to zoom back out and try to simplify for the sake of what I want to do later today and Saturday. But we're now thinking carefully and listening to your comments, Robert S. Hildebrand. Thank you. Okay, we doing okay? Still got 30 minutes. Let's keep going. Look at this. So Bob suggested I read a few papers. I forget which paper this was. But this, I have to say, this is a familiar looking fold and thrust belt look. Like when I went to graduate school in Idaho State University, I had nightmares about how to finish some of these advanced structural geology labs. And I had to restore all this stuff, you know. If you're an advanced geology student, you remember trying to do something like that. You take all these folds and thrust faults and try to undo every one of them to get to the original stratigraphy before the mountain building event. Well, this is exactly what we're squinting at and trying to figure out the best we can. I'm going to continue to think about it. But I take your point. It's not as simple as I was making it before. What is? What is as simple? Okay, here we go, man. Mount Robeson in southern British Columbia. This is a Hildebrand cross-section. This is a standard look at a cross-section of Belt Purcell, Cambrian rocks. And the main message from today is that, my God, is that right? There's 4 different generations of black lines in the same area. It's not one squeeze. If you're feeling lost, we have thrust faults from squeezing the crust, from compressing it, from shortening it. And we're at the surface and we're cutting through this stuff like butter, a knife through butter. And here are all these knife marks cutting through butter. But I guess what we're talking about today, and we eventually conceal the Baja BC fault underneath this mess, is that we keep slicing the same area 4 times. Wow, okay. It's a process, everybody. It's a process. Bob goes on in the same email. Here's another area from my special paper 457. This is the script NAP, which is on the figure you sent. Okay. I don't want to get in the weeds, I think, but same idea. Complicated. We're folding in there as well. Okay, I think we need to move on. We can all agree this is incredibly complicated geology, but please don't lose sight of the main point. The main point is there's something major and simple, one simple major strike slip fault, apparently, underneath this. Like it's down here. And that's what I was hoping Bob could do some kind of basic sketch on a napkin, but he said it's just too complicated. I can't do it. I don't think it's worth it. Well, I wasn't asking for a detailed restoration, a reconstruction of the whole area. I think I'm trying to imagine somehow, and I don't think I've seen it yet, do we have one Baja BC fault that's cut into pieces by the 3 older generations of thrust faults, but concealed by the upper one? I mean, by Saturday morning, maybe I'll just make my own in a very simple way. And if Bob will go, no, you're not. I'll do it. You're going to screw it up if you do it that way. Okay, good. Nice. Revised collisional suite docu sketch. I just showed that. Very good. What did I show you? I showed you this. So I don't know if I'm going to take the care to draw all these details, if this even passes the mark. I'm not sure this is truly the way to do something like this, but I was just trying to take what we did here and do it here. Remember, we need to cut this and send this portion of the sketch to British Columbia and have this part stay down in Utah. Dock and slice. I'm having a good time. I hope you are too. No technical malfunctions yet, but that's about to come, of course. Just more shots of the idea that the Canadian Rockies are just riddled with these thrust faults. To me, this is a big, apparently to me, brand new idea that they're not all the same age. Where have I been? Maybe everybody in geology realizes that there's 4 different generations of thrust faults in the Canadian Rockies. Not me. I figured everything was all the same age. All right. Yeah. Okay, so we're getting close. We're zeroing in on the segment of the custom Bob Hildebrand slideshow that froze me. And Okay, first thing, where are we? Here's Calgary. By the way, humble brag. Maybe it's just a brag. I was invited to be the keynote speaker at some major geology conference in Calgary, Alberta next May. And I was flattered, and I said, of course, I'd be happy to go up there. Huge thing, a big venue. And they said, could you give me a talk title? It's more than 6 months away or whatever, but like, what are you going to talk about? I'm like, well, I'm going to Calgary. Wonder what title I'll give them. And without thinking about it more than 10 minutes, I said, okay, here's my talk title. Did the Canadian Rockies form in Nevada? The guy didn't even bat an eyelash. Probably didn't even read the title, just copy and pasted it into the program. Did the Canadian Rockies form in Nevada? Did this stuff, the Canadian Rockies, just immediately west of Calgary, Alberta, form in Nevada, in the US of A? All right, well, that's not our topic today. It eventually will be, of course. But here are the 4 generations of activity on apparently 4 distinctly different thrust fault packages in this illustration. And then what's this to the west? Students, what is this to the west? It's the hinterland. It's the metamorphic stuff brought to the surface and the sediment being shed away and dumped into piles to the east and to the west. Okay, so these numbers with these different colors are our 4 batches of thrust faulting. Zooming in for dramatic effect. Here's Bob's concealed Baja BC fault. There's a bunch in this map that I don't understand yet. Still don't totally think I even get what these arrows are. We're palinspastic restoration of key thrust faults. Okay. So 10 days late, we're finally back to this thing that I played 3 episodes ago, where I was just commenting like, oh my God, I don't get this. Well, I think I get more, maybe all of it now. Let's listen to Bob.
First, there are 2 different age thrust belts which approach the Tintina Rocky Mountain Trench system from the east and broadly occur on opposite sides of the easterly flowing Peace River, or nowadays what is known as the Peace Arm and Williston Lake. Let's look at the Williston Lake area in greater detail.
You remember this?
Right here.
Thank you, Bob.
In the Musqueam Ranges north of the river, the East Vergent fold thrust belt of the Kachika Trough comprises thrust faults, rock units, and facies that widen and continue northward into the Selwyn Basin, where rocks and thrusts were intruded by 99 to 92 million-year-old post-collisional plutons of the Tombstone Mayo Suites.
Okay.
Whereas in the Hart Ranges, which lie to the south of the river,
Yep.
The well-known Cordilleran fold thrust belt of the southern Canadian Rockies, which is temporally complex and has a major pulse of thrusting 54 to 50 million years, as documented by Ben Vanderplume and co-worker. These thrust faults transect and overthrust folds and thrust faults of the older northern belt extending southward from Selwyn Basin.
Okay.
Further north and to the west of the Selwyn Basin, Kachika Trough, thrusting appears to have been related to the 100 million year Peninsula Range's orogeny, and there the Tintina Fault is readily recognized and mapped as a major strike slip fault because it is younger than the thrusts to the east.
Okay.
However, south of the Peace River area, where many thrusts are younger than 54 million years, an equivalent strike slip fault is unrecognized. Instead, the topographic southern Rocky Mountain Trench is generally considered to be dominated by normal or small displacement strike slip faults, as we saw earlier. These contrasting observations are reconcilable because the northern sector of the strike slip system postdates 100 million year folding and thrusting in the Selwyn-Kachika region, whereas in the southern Cordillera, many thrusts postdate inferred northward migration, as documented by 52 million to 50 million cratonic paleopoles from the hinterland to the west. Thus, The most likely solution is that the southward continuation of the Tintina Fault within the southern Rocky Mountain Trench was overridden and buried by post-strike slip thrust sheets derived from the southwest. The trench is now topographically obvious due to Eocene deformation, extensional collapse, and erosion of 7 to 8 kilometers of rock from the thrust stack, which included the Bell-Purcell allochthon, transported northeastward on the Lewis and related thrust faults.
I don't know how you're feeling, but I feel a lot better 10 days later. With all that homework that you and I did together, with our sketching, with our hokey stuff, and there's more hokey stuff coming with colored buckets and everything else, those numbers made sense to me. Those numbers are tied to the collisions that we learned last time. You want to do that right now? Can I remind you of the collisional ages that came from Hildebrand himself? This is a couple shows ago. I said, how many collisions do we have, Bob? And he's like, well, we've got 3 main collisions in the Cretaceous. Reminding you the Cretaceous is from there to there, Jurassic, Triassic. 3 main collisions in the Cretaceous, 3 collisions in the Jurassic-ish. And I really don't know if these are smaller, but we're playing mostly with these 3 guys. And then here's the 50-million-year-old hit with Silesia. I'm about to start moving towards a coloring system inspired by a couple more emails, and this will bleed into Saturday. Still have 15 minutes left for today's episode. What's next? I guess one more look at our hinterland and our thrust faults. But if there's 4 different ages of thrust faults, are there 4 different ages of uplift in this hinterland? Or is it just Eocene? I still have major snags, but we're making progress. I've lost track of the email exchanges and what day it was and everything else, but I'm just grabbing more clips of helpful emails from our friend Bob. We know now there was not continuous thrusting from 120 to 70 million years ago, but instead brief periods of separated by great lengths of time, 124, 100, 84, and early Eocene. One of the points of my paper was that one would need to restore the slip on the Eocene thrusts, those are the youngest ones, to even begin to understand where the Baja BC fault might run. It does not matter a hoot what is beneath the Eocene thrusts, as he suggests. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what she's talking about now. I pointed out several places where one might look, such as the Ochre Base. Okay, I've lost it. I don't know who he's referring to here. Let's move on. So do you remember the email to set up today and Saturday that I asked Bob those questions about, does each batch of thrust faults match the collisions and so on? Here are the replies from Bob, who's very generous with his time, and he's very careful with what he sends back. Only 2 of the 4 generations of thrusts are relevant. 100-million-year-old thrusts coming down from Selwyn Basin, and the Eocene faults, those are 54 to 50 million years old, that override the trench and transect the 100-million-year-old threads. I still need to sketch that, or somebody does, before Saturday. I also, with the slice of the Dawkins slice, want to carefully look at all the units that are offset by the Baja BC fault. Nick, I would call them truncations, as we don't know where the more westerly parts are. Most of the westerly parts of the belt are missing. You can see that by the isopachs throughout the western interior basin. If you don't understand this, ask me. I don't understand, but I have an idea for Saturday morning. Because please remember, viewers, we keep jumping back and forth between dock and slice, dock and slice. Remember, all this thrust fault business is part of the dock, is part of the collision. And you're going to have to be nimble enough as a viewer. I hope it's not too confusing. I'll try to be careful when I switch to the slice versus the dock, but it's a pattern. It's a 1-2 punch. Dock, slice, dock, slice, dock, slice, dock. If we have 4 or 5 generations of thrust faults, if we have 4 or 5 generations of strike slip faults that offset the thing that docked, then those are the buckets by color. If it were me, says Bob Hildebrand, I'd probably stick with the 100 million and the Eocene thrusts, although the 76 to 72 million year old are laramide structures as well, but likely represent structures from earlier orthogonal parts of the ocean. I don't understand. I thought 84, 85 was our number. I need more on that. I don't get that. Do the 4 ages of thrusting in the thrust belt match the 4 separate collisions? The ages are reasonable matches for recognized orogenic events elsewhere in the Cordillera. 2 in the Jurassic, matching a widespread 160. Okay, well, that's a new number. With the younger Nevadan orogeny. Is that a new number? Well, maybe it's not. It's not a new number. I stand corrected. Okay, now we're suddenly in the Jurassic. All right. Move on. Did the 4 ages of thrusting generate their own thrust faults from scratch? Apparently so, says Robert Hildebrand. But bear in mind, most older ones are deformed by younger faults of several kinds, especially thrusts and even normal faults. They could get reactivated, but not likely, as later out-of-sequence thrusts typically cut the older thrusts, which is how we know that they are out of sequence. They are each related to different collisions, or in the case of the thrusts over the Tintina Rocky Mountain Trench Fault, I view them as the last gasp of transpression that drove the northern migration. Now, you know what I'm doing here. I'm trying to go deep, and I'm also trying to pull back out so that this can work for everybody. There's a wide variety of viewers right now, more than 700 of them, and 10,000 more that will watch the replay of this. My ultimate goal is to keep you interested. I don't want to lose you before we get to Alaska. And I want to get everybody up there. So occasionally I'll pull out and it's way too broad for you. And occasionally I'll go very deeply and you're saying, I'm lost in the weeds. That's my job as I view it, to keep zooming in and zooming out with level of detail so that I can keep everybody heading down the road. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll try. And by the way, Gary Paul emailed me and said, enjoying the alphabet. This is the first time, though, for me, Gary Paul, where we're looking at stuff that I'm not familiar with. Like we're eventually talking about Alaska and British Columbia, and I've barely spent any time up there. And Gary's point was, the prior alphabets were all Washington-centric, and Gary says, I've lived my whole life in Washington, and I've climbed all these peaks and everything else, and he had all those wonderful photos that you remember. So Gary went on to say in the email, I have new kind of respect for people who watch from so far away, who are engaged, like the Dutch night owl. Like, why does he keep tuning in? He doesn't know these places. Gary's experiencing that for the first time, and it's kind of an experiment for all of us. Does this format that we're using work for a place that most of us don't know anything about? Never even been there. It is kind of new. So far, it seems to be working, at least from my point of view. Did the 54 to 52 million year old thrusting, the youngest of the batch that concealed the Baja BC fault, occur in response to Silesia arrival? No, says Bob, as they continue all the way south to southern Utah and likely beyond. And since they don't appear in between Silesia and Rocky Mountains, it would be like hitting a car in front and having the damage at the rear. Nice job. Bob earlier responding and saying the Coast Plutonic Complex is a classic hinterland belt, high-grade metamorphism, exhumation, post-collisional breakoff, tonalitic and granodioritic plutons, the opposite of arcs, which are low-standing, low-grade, have pre-collisional plutons ranging from gabbro to granite. I'm sharing that because it's a much more pleasing couple of sentences to read than it was a week ago. Moving on. Oh, sorry. Yes. Bob sent this yesterday. I was asking for the different generations of thrust faults and do they tie with 4 different generations of exhumed hinterland? And he didn't really know what to do with my question, I don't think, but after thinking about it, here's one. He said, here's a big chunk of the 50 million year old hinterland in Canada. Needs to be restored southward. To the south, it turns east across the southern BC and Washington, Idaho, and Montana, then stops at the Tintina Rocky Mountain Trench Fault. It picks up again where it heads over to Texas, before turning south again through Mexico. That's the final figure in my new paper. So here it is, at least the northern part. So this is an exhumed hinterland, early tertiary. Now, if you talk to Coast Plutonic Complex experts, most of them, I'm not sure they're saying what Bob is saying. Maybe they are, but I don't think they are. So before we quit, I want to make sure you can see what I'm up to. Here's the last recorded clip that I wanted to share 10 days ago. Let's do it now and say that we can finish that custom slideshow that Bob put together for us 3 weeks ago.
Vanderplume and co-workers documented movement ages of a number of faults within the southern Canadian Cordillera using illite age analysis and discovered several discrete pulses that formed temporal belts of thrusting. Middle and late Jurassic, mid-Cretaceous, Cenomanian, and Eocene, from west to east, as you can see here. The ages are reasonable matches for recognized orogenic events elsewhere in the Cordillera, with the 2 Jurassic pulses matching a widespread 160 million year event and the younger Nevadan orogeny, respectively, whereas the mid-Cretaceous thrusts are a good fit with the 100 million year Peninsula Ranges origin, and the Campanian and Eocene thrusts good matches for early and late Laramide deformation, which are largely coincident with the Maastrichtian to Eocene development of the thick-skinned Rocky Mountain foreland massifs of the Western Cordillera. Although some workers had difficulty accepting the earliest Eocene age for thrusting, a large amount of independent data presented by Kurt Constanius suggests that an early Eocene age best fits movement on the Lewis and related thrusts, and so support the illite ages.
Okay. Thank you, Robert Hildebrand. We're not done with you, but viewers, I should point out, this guy's 76 years old, still razor sharp, full of detail, still writing. He's doing all this work in retirement. He's driven, independently driven, just out of curiosity. And I respect that. Some of us do this just because it's part of us and we love it. It's not driven by anything else. Okay, I think I'm finishing by building and doing a little cliffhanger to have you tune in on Saturday. Yeah, here it is. So if you're a new-ish viewer, you are not familiar with Mappy McMap. But this is the map that we built together in my backyard in the fall of 2020. And we were building it episode by episode. I was involving kids and we were deciding colors, and families were sending in colored pencils. And so we had all sorts of detail. And I was learning, of course, with everyone else and putting this all thing together. So I would call this Mappy McMap. I mean, this is basically a children's show combined with a graduate level seminar and everything in between. So that's Mappy McMap. But I think I need a new Mappy McMap. And I'm going to unveil it on Saturday morning. I've already started. But we're going to finish in these last few minutes with the motivation for me to start making a second version, version 2.0 of Mappy McMap that embraces Alaska. Sky Cooley. Feedback from me after seeing the first 4 episodes. Nick, Age of Faults versus Age of Rocks. Every time I see one of Bob's great maps spanning the entire West Coast, I wish I knew the ages of the faults. I want to put faults into familiar buckets: Severe, Laramide, Basin Range, Baja BC, etc. To my eye, the age of the rocks is less important than the age of the origin-collision. I want to see each color coded and bracketed in time, like you've done in past alphabets. Maybe takes Bob's map and color each origin's set of faults and adjacent hinterland areas. Thank you, Sky. Jerome, for Alaska, go with Gary's summertime idea of focusing on faults. Maybe treat the rock units not as terrains, but as units sandwiched between faults. This seems easier for parts of Alaska than for BC. Ask the basic questions of what these faults are. By that I mean, are they strike slip or something else? Have they always been this way? Clearly, there's a repeated cycle of subduction zone converting to strike slip. Even the Queen Charlotte Fairweather Fault, that is now north-south, I guess, was formerly accommodating subduction. Basically, has the Cordillera always had a cycle of making San Andreas-type faults? With that perspective, the rock units between the faults might be more telling of the tectonic events and easier to relate to the various tectonic models. If they correlate neatly to the other Cordilleran terrains, bonus. These guys are teachers. They have experience in the classroom being creative and finding themes that work. Here's one more from Sky before we quit today. Start drawing connections between the lower 48 and Alaska. I'm excited to learn more about Alaska's geology, but I get stuck almost immediately when I start heading north, just across the border in British Columbia from where I live in Montana. Formation names, the subduction model, the age of collision are the tools I have to connect the familiar with the unfamiliar. What familiar patterns exist in British Columbia's geology from the perspective of someone in Washington? Is there a continuity between the Cascades, Northern Rocky Mountains, and the mountain ranges of British Columbia? Should we consider British Columbia's geology to be more like the lower 48's or more like Alaska's? Are there limits to how far north Washington concepts can be extended? How do Alaskan geologists view British Columbia geology? Thank you, boys. Here's how we'll finish. I don't know if I like these colors, but this is my first crack at it for Saturday morning. For 4 major collisions, a la Bob Hildebrand: purple, orange, pink, red. And for each of these 4 major collisions, it's a start. And if you're a visual person, do these colors look too similar to you? Would you want 4 totally different colors that somehow look nice together? But my template is this. Remember I was talking about index cards last time? Here's a collisional suite that's purple. Here's a collisional suite that's orange. Here's a collisional suite that's pink. Here's a collisional suite that's red. Dots for mafic enclaves in the arc magmas. Tune in next time to see the thrilling conclusion of faults related to Bob Hildebrand's new paper, wordy title. Thank you for your attention. It's the top of the hour, right on the mark. There are 9 texts from Bob Hildebrand. Let's read them, and then let's go to your questions that you have. Thank you so much. I mean it. Thank you so much. If nobody showed up for these things, it would be a bummer. It would just be a big old bummer. I'd still do it, but it would suck. So the fact we have almost 750 live viewers basically every time we get together is a delightful thing. Can I remind you before we go to Bob's texts, because I'm stalling again, this is what nickzentner.com looks like. This is where one way to find our episodes. Here we are doing episode E right now. The Alaska Video Library continues to receive new videos. Looking ahead to after Thanksgiving, here's the interview I did with Jeff Tepper, Bob Hildebrand answering more. This is volume 2 of Bob answering people's emails and just adding additional slides and commentary. Trevor came back for another interview this past weekend, almost 5 days ago, and so on. And yes, there are some papers. They're all Hildebrand so far, except for Paul Hoffman's thing, which is talking about Hildebrand and some others. So we will eventually get off the Bob Hildebrand experience, but it's still November. It's still Bobvember. Speaking of who? Speaking of which, let's go to him. And Nat the Wonder Boy was over here saying, don't show all your texts. Don't show my text to you. So he's hidden the rest of my texts from other people. And let's go to Bob's. Oh, okay. So Bob, by text during the show today, Bob Hildebrand from Tucson, Arizona. I sent you the front page of the paper by Sizova. Thank you. I guess you emailed it to me. The new sketch is better for me. Oh, thank you, Bob. Exactly. The accretionary wedge becomes the fold and thrust belt. That is wild. That is wild. I'm going to go too far now. If you have an accretionary wedge at a subduction zone, and if you're patient enough, it becomes a fold and thrust belt? Or if it's an accretionary wedge involving a continent that's trying to subduct, that's the thing that becomes a fold and thrust belt? What in God's name? Seriously? The accretionary wedge becomes the fold and thrust belt. He's sketching, everybody. Okay, thank you. From the desk of Robert Hildebrand. Thank you. I'll turn these right side up and show them next time. Because the northward movement on the Tintina Rocky Mountain Trench was not a collision but post-collision, yes, there technically was no hinterland for this northward migration. Yeah, the hinterland is well to the west. Okay, we're not connecting on this, or maybe I'm not phrasing things properly. The thrusts in the thrust belt take time, but don't have to be instantaneous. The first thrust might be 84 million years, and they might last until 78 million years. In each case, they need to be dated, and typically they're not. Okay, interesting. Right, most post-plutonic complexes an arc, but they'd be wrong. Oh, most think, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that, I don't know, I'll find a delicate way to do it, I guess. I mean, how do I start talking to people in Alaska or British Columbia where everyone in the room is saying this is a volcanic arc, and I want to go, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, everybody, show of hands, everybody? Arc? Yeah, everybody in the room says it's an arc. What are you talking about? You're the one that's wrong. That's the week after Thanksgiving. How do you tell the difference between an arc magma and a slab failure magma? On my figure. Don't people look at oh, come on, Bob. Yes, we look at the figure. There's 75 of them. Thank you for the input. Questions from you. It's 4:05. Let's do about 10 minutes of live Q&A. I'm very, very comfortable at the moment. I don't know why. Uppercase, please. Copy and paste again if you added it earlier. David, in the Yukon, there have been a lot of discussion regarding slab pull versus mantle convection in the comments. Lots of confusion. Maybe a Karin episode down the line. Thank you. Many of you are asking for Basil to appear, Karin to appear, Stephen Johnson to appear. They all will be appearing. Just not right now. I know. I agree, David. Everybody loves slab pull and wants to talk about mantle and all that stuff. It's a potential area, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. Sven, cooler crust material is brittle, makes it easier to break into pizza boxes? I think so. Sharon, could 2024 unexpected dino fossil discovery in Skeena Mountains, North BC, help connect dots for offset on these rocks? Potentially, thank you. North Scotty Nerd, if a westward subducting slab results, west dipping thrust faults on the continent would be an eastward subducting plate resulting in thrust faults dipping east on the accreting terrain. I'm going to have to read that a few more times. I don't get it immediately, but yes, I am realizing that the geometry is what it's Bob say, crucial. And that ultimately helps us after Thanksgiving why we're getting slab failure magmatism to the east of the arc magmas, even though we're doing westward subduction. That seems to be counterintuitive to most everybody. But I've seen Bob's explanation. It works for me. Stan, if the Silesia hit did not produce the 52 to 54 million year old faults, what did? That's a big question. Bob is reporting on half a dozen or more collisions, and I don't know if we have the right things out in the water at the right times. And Bob maybe say, that's not my problem. I'm just reporting on the detail that we have on land. But it's an obvious question, isn't it? We're back to my opening statement a week ago. You don't just have thrust faults because there needs to be a reason for a major family of thrust faults, right? And in this series, we're tying thrust faulting to collisions with something out in the water. Bob says, don't ignore the colored thrusts. Don't ignore the colored thrusts. Thank you. Chris, relative to Alaska, what is the northern northeast bound of these collisional suites, the Tintina or other? Thank you. I don't know, but that's obviously where we're headed. We're going to take these index cards, and if we have these, each of these index cards is a separate colored bucket. Each trinket it's a good microphone, Nat. You know? Is each colored bucket a collisional vintage, organized by color? And on Saturday, can we use those colors and try to make a map of collisional suites tied to a major strike slip fault inland, dock, and slice? And can we get all four colors showing up between Mexico and Alaska? Won't know until we try. Okay, now I got problems. Let me go down to live. Sven, could subduction normalization, steady state, be a collision? I don't understand. Thanks for the question. Patrick, is there a delamination of the subducting plate as suggested by the animation causing the density discontinuity in the rocks or by composition of the rocks? Good question. I'm sure somebody can answer your questions. Brian, are hinterlands anything like basin and range? Well, I did cut my teeth on basin and range half-graben style extension in the late 1980s when I was a graduate student with Dave Rogers and others. And those ranges are lifting and rotating. I don't know if anybody's rotating in a hinterland. And there's an interesting intersection of metamorphic core complexes and the basin and range in southern Idaho, let's say, and down into Nevada, if that's what you mean. A few more half answers. Please define hinterland in this context. As I understand it currently, Rusty, a hinterland, as I understand it currently, Rusty, let me get one. A hinterland is this. A hinterland is a place where slab failure magmas are invading one of the bodies that collided, let's not be generic. This is North America colliding with an exotic terrain. It's the North American portion that's closest to the collision. And this is the thing that's getting pulled down underneath this thing before everybody pops back up. And I know I'm back to my simple sketches, but I don't know if I really want to be. I don't really know if I want to be like this. Maybe I do. Maybe I can figure out a way to get our index cards to look a little bit more accurate if we like this look. But the hinterland is here, Rusty. Stop, drop, pop. It's the pop. It's the pop area that's providing the sediment that's going away. And on Saturday, it may be a failure, but on Saturday, I want to, if we have a big package of sediment that's clearly from an uplifted and eroded 5 miles of crust, I want to see, do we have purple sediment? And then in the same area, do we have red sediment? And do we have pink sediment? And do we have orange sediment? The buckets. 3 more and we're done. Still down to live. So in our area, the San Juan Fold thrust belt would be the hinterland due now to eastward subduction. That's Gary Paul. Gary's asking about Western Washington, the fold and thrust belt, the pizza boxes of the San Juan Islands area. That's from the 100. Those are orange thrust faults, Gary, orange pizza boxes. And Gary says, are they the hinterland due now to eastward subduction? That's the kind of detail we're going to eventually get to. Maybe another Bob slideshow or something. I don't know. What are some themes? Here's another way to think about this. What are some major themes that appear to be with us all winter? Arc magmatism versus slab failure. Pretty obvious. That's going to be with us all winter. Kind of related to that, westward subduction versus eastward subduction. Maybe it's not always related to that question, but those seem to be tied together. The hinterland thing seems to be big to me, because I think we have major areas that can be traced from Washington up through Alaska that are hinterlands. You're like, what is that again? I don't know, like a bunch of metamorphic rock at the surface that should be 20 miles down, shot through with a bunch of slab failure magmas, and some thrust faults to the east. Does that not exist in Alaska? Maybe. But it seems down here, we'll find out by Saturday, unless I really run into a roadblock, I think we're going to have 2 or 3 different hinterlands with different colors tied to different colors of thrust fault families. And that's a perfect way to end. Thrust fault families. Thank you, Gary. A toast to you. Here's to your health. We're 5 episodes in and you're still with us. Thank you for your commitment. Here's to your physical and mental health for everyone in your community, including you. If you joined us late, I just want to remind you that Saturday morning's episode F at 8 o'clock Pacific time in the morning, 8 in the morning, will be our last episode in November. We're taking a week off for the Thanksgiving break here in the States, and then we will resume with 2 Pluton shows, G and H, in early December. Slab failure versus arc magnetism. All sorts of voices out in the hallway. But you're here, and I say, thank you, I love you, and goodbye. Still not consistent. Goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. I love you, and we'll see you Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Have a good evening. Goodbye. Roll the credits, Nat. Thank you.